All right. Hello, Kirk.
Hi, Sheldon. How's things going with you today?
Things are going okay. Dealing with
Yeah.
some crabgrass issues, though.
I'd rather deal with that than a stolen van.
What? You lost a van? Or was that me?
No, I thought you got
Oh,
your
yeah.
van stolen.
Well, that was a while ago.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's been replaced with a nice new car. So,
Oh, yeah. Maybe I should put a sign out the end of my driveway when my car gets old. Uh,
well, they don't like that at the insurance company.
if I'm inviting it to get stolen,
Yeah, they have there's a
besides who?
clause. There's a clause in the insurance that says that that's not
Yeah.
allowed.
And who wants to steal an old beater, anyways?
Well, that's what I would think, but they took it from where I lived to Winnipeg and left it somewhere it got towed and took a week for us to find it and they ended up writing it off. But
Well, I can see, if it's a van, you can rob houses and load up your van, and that's a lot more practical.
maybe, maybe.
You don't worry about whether it's a beater or not.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. But interestingly, like we got way more money for it than we thought we would from insurance. But I guess they send it all to China. They have auctions here and then it all
Oh,
goes
yeah.
to China. So
Hmm.
they're able to make the money at the auction that
Wow.
they settled for, but
That's
it
amazing because
all
they got
goes
to ship
overseas.
that. Yeah. They probably crunch it up in a packer, but still, they got to ship that over.
I don't know because it's like it's only worth like $1,000 in metal,
Mm. Hmm.
but yeah,
That's a
they
mystery. And the
I don't know.
question is, did they decide to ship it to China or not?
Well, or did the people that stole the car actually think about it before they
Decide,
stole
yeah.
it? Did they
Did decide.
decide, or did somebody else decide for them?
Yeah, because there's a lot of people who believe that you don't actually make decisions. It was all programmed in from the origin of the universe.
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter.
Or God made me do it.
That's true. Or as Flip Wilson used to say, the devil made me do it.
Yep.
Flip
But
Wilson, by the
there
way,
are
is a
Bible
comedian.
verses that talk about God hardened their hearts, or
Yep. Well, we'll have
um,
to talk about that.
yeah. So yeah, how are you doing? What's going on in beautiful
Oh, I
Ontario?
think I'm doing great. I can't complain. The grass is growing faster than I can mow it, so that is some cause for concern. But other than that, no, life is good. I've got major projects I'm working on. I love my work. I'm not sick, nor am I on the doorstep of eternity as far as dying or anything. Although that might not be a bad idea either. That's a different topic. But
Yep.
yeah, nothing to complain about.
And you took a tree down. That's always exciting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the exciting part was missing my solar array panels on the left and the trampoline on the right, and the house on the other side. And basically, I only had a narrow avenue to drop it in, and it was about. I paced it off afterwards. I think it measured off to
You paced it
around
off
40 feet.
after
After it was laying
after you
on the
took the tree
ground,
down.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's hard to pace it off when it's still standing up, to walk up that trunk taking 1 meter paces, but I
True. True.
dropped it, then I paced it. And I think it was close to 40 feet, or maybe, I don't know what, it was, what, 12, 13, maybe 15 meters. I can't remember exactly. And it didn't hit anything on the way down. So,
Nicely done. Nicely
and I
done.
hate I planted that tree. I hate doing it, but
Oh,
I made a mistake in planting it too close to our septic tank, and the roots were steadily but systematically about to destroy my tank, and then I'd be in deep trouble. So it was the tree or the tank, and since we all need to use septic facilities once in a while, but don't need the tree as often, unless you're a dog, then I decided to take the tree down.
so you took the tree down. Now you got the stump. Did you bring somebody in to destroy the stump, or did you blow it
No,
up, or what did you do? Like,
no, I haven't actually taken care of the stump yet, but I do have a plan, and it's my chainsaw. So I'll just come in at ground level and slope the end of the blade down a little bit, and sort of go around the stump like this, so that I have this kind of concave cut that goes down below ground level slightly, and that way I can just mow right on over the stump with no worries.
So you don't have any worry about roots continuing to grow at all?
No, this particular tree, it's done. There are trees that the roots will explode, like an aspen, for example. I cut one of those down, and then the following year I had at least 50 new aspens springing up from the roots. And mowed them. And it took me 2 years of mowing these aspen trees, not allowing them to get us. So eventually the roots run out of nourishment if there's no photosynthesis going on. And after 2 years, they finally quit. So that's that. But this is a maple, and it doesn't do that. It may put out shoots right at the stump, but it doesn't put shoots out from the roots.
Good to know. Good to know. We live in the suburbs, so our trees, I have two, one in the back, one in the front. One we planted in the back, Japanese something, and beautiful pink, not cherry blossoms, but a similar type of thing. And
Very nice.
we get like 4 days of that every year,
Yeah.
and then it's gone. So I'm like, every morning I'm looking outside. Is it gonna bloom? Like the leaves are there, but will it bloom
And then when it
today?
does bloom, okay, everybody, take time off work, get out
Lots of
there. You got
pictures.
4
Get your
days.
pictures
Yeah.
now, and then they're gone. And so
That's
yeah,
the sad thing about blossom trees of any description. Although with the apple trees I have and pear trees, those blossoms convert into apples and pears. So
well, this
not
it
so
does little tiny crabapple type things. It's a Japanese Goliath something.
yeah,
It's a
probably has
neat
pretty
tree. It's
leaves too.
red. It's
Yeah,
what's that?
they probably have pretty leaves. It's an ornament.
Yeah, they're very very nice. And then of course it
Yeah, I like
litters
those.
every fall with its little hard as rock things that the
Well,
lawnmower
the
loves to
rats,
spit around.
the rats might appreciate that though.
We don't have them here. We have cats.
Oh,
There's cats in our house
take
in
care
the
of the
neighborhood.
rats
So yeah, we
and the
don't have any.
songbirds.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, but yeah, our big issue right now is crabgrass. So I'm dealing with that, which
yeah.
not good.
Oh, I know about that. Having been grown up in Manitoba, I know about crabgrass.
Yeah. So speaking of crabgrass, free will. How do you like that?
Yeah, nice segue there. It's just
So
very
you
natural.
wrote an article. I think I read this a while ago, but I've got lots of questions. And that's my job here on the podcast is
Oh,
ask
it's
you
all
lots of
it's
questions because you're the expert. I'm just
yeah.
how's it work? I'm your boss. You're the expert. I'm your boss. But yeah, so I ask questions and try and dumb it down so that I can understand it. So free will.
Yeah.
Now, I've been through 4 years of Bible school, and I don't think we spent more than an hour talking about free will in philosophy
Yeah.
class, maybe.
Yeah.
So let's define it first of all.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I did a master's degree in philosophy, and I focused in that program on the problem of evil and the existence of God. And of course, if anybody's familiar with the problem of evil, like does the evil and injustice in this world, is it a good reason to not believe in God? And if not, then what do we do? How do we explain that? So Alvin Plantinga's famous free will defense pretty much neutralize the logical problem of evil, although there's still probabilistic problems of evil and so forth. But it all hinges on free will. So it's a hot topic in philosophy, or it's not, maybe hot is the wrong word, it's an important topic. And so the philosophers have gotten together and they argue about these things to define what is free will. And there's different possible definitions, but there is a mainstream kind of generally commonly granted free will definition, and it goes like this. Free will is the ability to make a decision that satisfies two criteria. Number one, the decision must not be determined by any antecedent conditions. That is, there's nothing back there, like the origin of the universe, the laws of physics, or what you ate for breakfast. Nothing back there that determined that decision. And number two, you could have decided otherwise. Those are the two and only two criteria to define what a free will decision is. And if you can make decisions that satisfy those criteria, then that's evidence that you have free will, or that you do have free will.
Okay, so let me ask some questions around this just to make sure I understand. So free will means nobody's making me do it, or nothing is making me do it other than myself.
Correct.
And I could have had another choice.
Yeah, you could have decided to do the opposite of what you actually decided on. Now, when you say nobody's making me do this, free will does totally acknowledge the existence of influences, coercion, manipulation, physical influences. But free will is the ability to, yes, you're being heavily influenced. Maybe somebody wants to rob you and they're pointing something at your head, saying, hand over your wallet. No, that's an influence. But you could just decide to override that and say, no.
Shoot me instead.
Well, I would not recommend that. I would say
No.
go pound salt, or go. No, sorry, yeah.
I'm busy right now.
I don't know. Like, I'm not sure my wallet
Is that even loaded?
Yeah, or is it a real gun? But anyways, there certainly are influences involved. You have people who've overridden the most extreme influences, like plenty of people have been executed for things they firmly believed in and refused to recant.
Right.
So that would be one example where there's a fellow in Edmonton that tells a story, but him and two of his friends became sincere Christians in a particular town in the Middle East. And that became known, and the three of them were arrested. And I think it was each Friday after, I couldn't, not for sure the day, everybody would gather in the town soccer field or whatever, and they would execute those one per week. But they had an opportunity to recant, to turn and decide, no, I'm not going to believe that Jesus is God, the creator of the universe, and offers us eternal life and forgiveness of sin. So he witnessed two of his friends go to their death, beheaded in that case. Both of them were beheaded because they refused to recant. So the pressure must be enormous when you know these people are not bluffing. Last week they terminated my friend. This week it's my turn. And we know they're not bluffing, so it's a big decision. But they can override that, and that could be an example. It doesn't prove you have free will. Proof is a very difficult thing. It's a very high bar. But if you have it, you can do stuff like that. You can override the most extreme examples of coercion, intimidation, and influence.
So does free will ever have like exceptions? Like, I think of if there's, like, it says in the Bible that God hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Yeah.
Numerous times.
Yeah,
because the 10 plagues needed to happen for Sunday school lesson.
Well, yeah, and for the whole world to find out about.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that is a very good question, and the first thing to remember is this: it's logically possible that, you see, free will is not something that arises naturally. The laws of nature do not produce free will.
Well,
in fact, it's the opposite. The laws of nature are deterministic. They determine outcomes, and any outcome they determine was determined by nature, the laws of nature, physics. So you have to have something immaterial. The free will has to be an immaterial thing. You could call it a supernatural thing, where you define supernatural as something that is not determined by the laws of physics and nature and the origin of the universe. It is immaterial. So you could define it that way. And if it is immaterial, it depends where you got it from. So let's say I think the best explanation, you need a mind if you're going to make use of free will. So there's a rock outside. No point in giving that free will. It can't even perform moral deliberations. It's got no mind. So, you need a mind. But what is an explanation? What's the best explanation for the origin of minds in this world? Well, it's got to be something itself. If it can't be natural laws, it has to be something itself that is immaterial. And if we're talking about minds, a good explanation for the origin of a mind is another mind, but maybe a superior one, maybe one not bound by time and space. So that mind could decide, in theory, that at a particular date, for a particular period of time, and for a particular series of decisions, you're not going to have free will. You're not going to be able to freely determine your decision. It's going to be imposed on you. And so, in theory, it's possible to bring in, to just say, turn off free will for, let's say, a week. It's possible, or at least turn off free will when it comes to the following decision. It's possible, logically speaking, but it does not follow from that therefore Pharaoh never had free will. In fact, if you look at those incidents, the first few times, it's Pharaoh who's hardening his heart. He's doing it. And then it reaches the point. But the other thing is, it doesn't even follow that because God hardened Pharaoh's heart, that therefore he suspended Pharaoh's free will. Because as I said, you can bring to bear influences on a person to dispose them to go one way or the other. For example, maybe he can make Moses really annoying to Pharaoh. He just hates to see when that guy shows up. And we all know that if you have a really bad attitude towards someone, you're less likely to grant their request. Now, that shouldn't have anything to do with it if you're an ethical person. But anybody who's running, a slavery workforce probably has some ethical issues, and Pharaoh would be one of those. So yes, that's a possibility, but it doesn't follow that he never had free will. And the other thing, it doesn't even follow that God suspended his free will. It's just that he brought to bear certain influences, and they could even be an upset stomach. You're not feeling good today. Here comes Moses. Man, I hate seeing this guy, and I feel like that liver and onions I ate is just not being processed. I want him out of here. What do you want? No, you can't have it. Get out. And then, you see, we can influence one another. And people who are very good at manipulation and influence, and that's an interesting thing. There's a line between legitimate influence and illegitimate manipulation. And if humans can do that, if they can harden someone else, if they can give that other person a bad attitude towards whatever this topic is, then you're not interfering with their free will. You're just imposing some manipulation and influence and so forth. They could override that, but they're already, as we see in Pharaoh's case, predisposed on their own to hardening their own heart. So it wouldn't take much to keep that ball rolling.
Okay, and so I have one more example. In the setup and all the prophecies of Jesus coming, there's a villain in the story besides Satan who basically sells him out. Now, Judas, there's something there. There was a person that had to do this because of prophecy. It was prophesied. So someone was born to do this. How does that work?
Yeah, well, there's actually a couple of good questions there, Sheldon. First of all, just a general comment about prophecy. So God says,
and just so everybody knows, I did not tell Kirk I was going to ask these questions.
Oh, no.
These are just for free.
Yeah. No, if you've thought about these things, you shouldn't need a heads up on what you're going to get asked about, and it's even more fun if you don't know what the questions will be. That's why if I knew it ahead of time what all the questions would be, it'd get boring. So, no prophecy, but I've handled these. We not just me. I think we've all. I mean, I think you probably thought through this yourself, Sheldon, too. But let's get this out on the table. So prophecy. Let's say God said no. Let's say you got in a time machine and you went ahead to the next election in your country and you observed who gets elected. Now you come back in your own time, which an election now is in the future relative to you. But you know what's going to happen. You can even write it down in such and such a year. This party is going to be elected, and you publicize that. You put it in the newspapers. Now the question is, does that determine who gets elected? Or does who gets elected determine the information that you now have? And in the time machine example, it was who gets elected determines what you know about the future when you come back to the present. So you have not determined the future. Rather, the future has determined what you now know in the present. And so it's just a matter of observation of God transcends time. Then he actually exists, according to theory, he actually exists at all points in time simultaneously. He knows, he observes what your decision will be. And that knowledge that God has as to what you will decide is determined by what you will decide, and he has observed that. Now, you sitting back here say, well, I'm going to have to decide that now that he's told me what I'm going to decide. No, I mean, God doesn't usually tell you ahead of time what you're going to decide, but no, God's knowledge, his foreknowledge, means that he knows about stuff that happens in the future and that is contingent upon that stuff that he sees. Now, it's not totally contingent on that because God also has a plan. And so when he prophesies about the future, he may be prophesying, like he knows all the contingencies. Judas, he might have selected him because we know that Judas was pilfering from the pile of money on a regular basis. So we already know Judas had a problem. But he might have really actually been attracted to the teachings of Jesus, and so, but that's not good enough. If you might like a person, you might want to follow that person, but at the same time you have a big ethical problem. You have a weak point, an Achilles heel. So in the case of, first of all, prophecy, it's the free decisions in the future that determine the knowledge, or it's the plan that God might have in general for nature or whatever, a historical plan that he orchestrates. So a guy conducting an orchestra would be an illustration here. He's not determining what everybody's going to blow. I used to play in a stage band, like a big one, with about, 35 people. I used to play the trombone. I could blow a wrong note anytime I jolly well felt like it. And contrary to what the conductor of the orchestra wanted. But the conductor of the orchestra still somehow provided the leadership, the direction for which part of the orchestra gets louder, when you get closer, softer, when you start, all this kind of stuff. So God is orchestrating history in that way. Now, I see Kim H. has asked a question, who determines the laws of nature? Well, that'd be different, because nature does not have free will. It'd be, let's say you're going to create a video game, and you're going to have certain rules in that video game, certain laws of the video game, like if you get to respawn so many times, that kind of stuff. It's the writer of the software who determines the rules. In the case of the universe, it has software too. We call that the laws of physics. So God determines the laws of physics, and that's the environment within which we live.
Can you explain a few of those just so that the audience can, like, what are some of the laws of physics that?
Yeah, let's take one everybody's probably heard of, the speed of light. Okay, the speed of light is a constant. Like it's not like your car. You can have that stopped or you can have it going. Although, okay. Let's say that was a bad choice because you could slow down photons and so forth. So let's But still, the speed of light itself, 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second, that's a constant that you can't, in other ways, we can use it. But let's take a simpler one, a simpler law of physics. So an apple falls out of a tree. And you notice that all the apples follow exact same pattern. That is, they accelerate towards the ground at a constant rate. What is that constant rate? I keep getting mixed up. It's 32 feet per second squared if you're going to work in feet. If it's meters, what is it, 9.8 meters per second squared or something like that. So that seems to be a law. It's not just arbitrary how fast. Some don't speed up to twice the speed of sound before they hit some poor guy napping under the tree. No, they all accelerate at exactly the same rate. That appears to be, so you have a thing you call acceleration, but what velocity will it have when it hits the ground? Well, the velocity is going to equal acceleration times the amount of time it was falling. So if it's way up in the air, it's going to have more time, the velocity will be higher. And that's the same. Velocity equals acceleration times time. That could be called a law of physics, a law of nature.
Okay, so when I'm sitting in physics class, the laws of nature are the formulas that are used to determine answers to these questions in a way.
Not really. The formulas, or we call those equations, are merely descriptions of the laws of nature. In first year physics, one of my professors in one of my courses says, we have no idea what these laws of physics are, or where they are, or what they do. All we know is that we observe repeatable patterns in how nature behaves, and we describe these patterns in mathematical sentences, you could say, like force equals mass times acceleration would be an example. Velocity equals acceleration times time in its simple.
So like looking at that force one, so the laws of nature are what makes that formula actually useful.
Yeah, it's
because the formula could always change if the law wasn't there.
Well, if there were no laws, that would be just a completely chaotic world. It'd be an insane asylum. But you couldn't even have one.
Yeah, I've lived nearby one of those.
Change in theory. Yeah. If the laws of physics you woke up tomorrow and they were all different, that'd be a serious problem, because even your own body functions according to the laws, and if those get messed up, you might find yourself dead. But they could in theory change, but they don't seem to change, the laws of physics. And if we do observe them change, we realize, well, we might have the description wrong here. Let's say the mass actually appears to increase as you get closer to the speed of light. Let's rework this, and then you get Einstein's general theory of relativity there, which is a fuller understanding of the laws of physics.
So the law of physics never changed there. It was just our understanding of it. Kim, did that answer your question? I guess the question that is more there is the who. Who determines the laws of nature? So if you don't have a mind that created it, it came from somewhere. And I think we've had a lot of these conversations where it's like, okay, where's that coming from then?
Yeah, the laws of physics are really software. Yeah, they're very analogous to software, and you do need a mind to create software such that the outcome is orderly and predictable and all this kind of stuff.
And as a software developer, not having a good mind, there's always bugs. And so when you look at the laws of nature, are there bugs?
Yeah, well, it depends who wrote the laws of nature, and if you have an omniscient mind who creates nature in the first place. He's not just like you and me who write software to run on a computer that somebody else made. He makes the thing from ground up. So it's not likely there would be bugs. In fact, there's a philosophical argument, which we won't go into today because that'd be a whole episode, but it's called the maximally great being. And logic dictates that if a maximally great being, which would be absolutely perfect, creates software, no bugs, for example, if it exists in one possible world, that it exists in all possible worlds. It's a very powerful argument for the existence of a supreme mind that is maximally great in that degree of greatness beyond which it's logically not possible to be even greater still. That's a
That's a different topic. Okay, we'll get into that later. So let's go. What would it look like? I'm going through. There's a article on your site, kirkderson.com/blog/freewillb. It's in the it's in the YouTube description as well. You've got the contradictory life of a materialist. If you ask someone who does not believe in free will why they made such and such a decision, they are going to respond. So get into that a little bit, because I think it's funny.
It is funny. It's hilarious. So one of the most absurd things I ever saw in my life happened when I posted a video in response to Sabina Hossenfelder, who's a theoretical physicist, and she's arguing that we don't have free will. And so I said, well, if you don't have free will, you can't even think. You can't even use propositions, string them together, and come to conclusions. And then a short was made from that. Somebody, just a 30-second short. Turns out that for that short, it's the most popular thing I ever put out there since published. What is it? It's got almost 24,000 views. But the real funny part was the comments. So arguments broke out in the comments section from people who believed very firmly that we do not have free will and cannot make free decisions. That in fact, but they're deciding to argue anyways. And I pointed this out. Like, isn't this
now? Are these Christians arguing this, or is it not? So these are people that are saying the laws of physics are making them rate these comments.
Making them argue these comments. Well, they never had a decent response to that. I mean, but it's like they believe that everything they think, do, and see is completely determined by the laws of physics. And here comes Kirk Durston arguing we got free will. We can make decisions that are not determined by the laws of physics, but rather are made according to immaterial axioms of logic or mathematics. Well, they decided to dispute that. And I use the word decided in their case rather loosely because they don't think they can decide anything, but yet they decided to argue with me and present rational arguments as to why they think there's no such thing as rationality. And it was just bizarre. It was like the law of non-contradiction being violated left, right, and center, but yet they didn't seem to really see it. It was just bizarre.
Is that because they couldn't see it?
Well, maybe, but they could have said, well, I don't see your point because it's been determined that I don't see your point. Well, that would be fine.
That's the question. Like, what's the point of, like, this is one of those comment thread on Reddit or YouTube or whatever. Like, what's the point of arguing this? Because you're arguing with the internet and the internet can't think.
Yeah, I know.
But,
and unfortunately, a lot of people refuse to think as well.
Yes. So it's like, I can't go to bed now. Somebody on the internet said something wrong.
Well, now I argue with ChatGPT. I just fell for it again a couple of days ago and got into an argument with it. I won, by the way.
Did it complain?
No, it conceded that I'd made them, and then confessed and fell all over itself. Apologized.
Yes. Yeah. If anybody wants to know what I feel about AI, like when I do these YouTube thumbnails, I just go to AI, I use Midjourney, and I just type in free will, and I just post whatever it gives me. So it's like usually some weird thing. So.
Yeah, but actually ask AI, what's the best for what optimum search engine for search engine optimization? What title should I use? That guy was telling me that's what I should do. The titles are usually very boring, though. Like, they're just optimized to.
Yeah, I prefer to just like make something up.
I like your titles, Sheldon. Yeah. They're better.
So, how do we know if we have free will?
Yeah, how do we know if we have free will? I think the first step you would take is to realize that to even ask the question, requires free will. First, for example, laws of physics produce deterministic outcomes, and it will never produce, and the belief, even the belief in free will, is something that will not arise from equations that have mass, energy, time, that sort of thing in it. It will not arise from that. So where does this, even the belief, even the concept, even you don't even have to have the belief. All you need to have pop into your mind is the concept of free will, and you have disproved determinism. You cannot entertain, the concept won't even emerge.
Because why would
free
it?
will.
If it's just the laws of physics that are driving every decision that's made or every action that's made, because there's no decisions,
Yeah,
right? Like,
that's right.
why was that YouTube video created by that person? Like,
Yeah,
why would the laws of physics have made that person do that?
yeah, yeah. The moment that arises, see, the laws of physics are always described mathematically with variables that consist of variations of mass or matter, space, time, and energy, like all those things. So if you look at the outcome, let's say the outcome is Bill down the road thought about free will. That's an outcome. Is it an outcome of space, time, matter, and energy? No matter, even if you have really fancy equations and lots of them, they're all going to reduce to utilizing variables that are variations of space, time, matter, and energy. Momentum, for example, might be mass times velocity. So you got a few different variables all encoded in momentum. You will never get.
You're giving me hives just thinking about those physics classes right now. So
Yeah,
just
well,
so you're
let's
aware.
not think about those. Another thing, though, we don't have to.
I can't help it. I cannot help it, Kirk.
Yeah, I know. Especially at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm supposed to be sleeping, and one of those infinite loop thoughts start going in your brain. Now, the brain is very interesting in and of itself because the brain is a physical object. So right now, I am reading a book. It's not yet out there. It's by a neurosurgeon, Michael Egnor. He has conducted thousands of brain surgeries. And I would highly recommend this book when it comes out in June. In fact, I'm arranging for him to come on this very live stream right here. We're going to have a good discussion with this brain surgeon. But he started off as a materialist and believing that science explains everything. But in the course of his brain surgeries, he made observations and came to the conclusion that we have a mind that's not material, and we also can make decisions that are not determined by any physical stimuli, because they have ways of stimulating the brain. It's a very important aspect of brain surgery because you don't want to be carving off stuff that's really important. So he explains it in his book. So we're going to have him on. Well, we're going to have a crazy time with him because it's not just the existence of the mind, but free will at stake. And this mind seems to be immortal, like it's not contingent on whether your body's dead or alive.
Wow.
So that's another way that you can, by experimentation, by, let's say, carving out huge chunks of the brain, or to see if that affects the person's self-awareness, or if it affects their ability to make free decisions, or by stimulating the brain. Like sometimes the person will say, and this is one of the examples, you can stimulate the brain and the person's arm raises up. But they do it live because they have to have feedback from the individual to make sure they're not going to cut into something important here. So the person's arm goes up. So it's been done by the brain. You've just supplied the electrical stimuli. And the person will say, my arm was, I didn't do that. You made me do this. But who's the I did not decide to raise my arm. That was you with your electrical stuff. So there's different ways. And then there's a third way there's two other ways to decide whether you have free will. The third way is can you think using immaterial basic principles like the law of non-contradiction or logical causality, that if you have these premises, they then are related to a conclusion. That's logical causality. You do it every day. Like, you may not use those terms, but everybody thinks. You can't even walk down the street without thinking. You can't get out of bed without deciding to get out of bed. So there's all of this stuff goes on. So the question is, can you think using immaterial principles that themselves are not affected by the laws of physics? The law of non-contradiction, for example, that's not affected by all. You can go anywhere in the universe, and the law of non-contradiction would still hold, or the causal principle for the laws of nature. Laws of nature won't even work without an a priori basic principle we call the causal principle. There has to be some relationship between the laws and what happens in this world. Laws of nature would not be able to affect how this world works without a causal relationship between the laws and space-time, matter, and energy. So rational thought is either it's not, if it's determined by physics, then you can't decide anything, and the logical rules mean nothing, and rational thought is a pipe dream.
So I have just a question. So, like, you have these physicists, incredibly brilliant people, that didn't decide to become physicists. It just happened.
Yeah, from the origin of the universe decided it.
Who had to figure things out,
yeah,
to train their brain to be able to do this job.
And all of that
was determined at the creation of the universe.
Yeah, at the origin of space-time, matter, and energy, the laws of physics. Yeah.
They obviously enjoy it because otherwise...
Yeah, except that enjoyment too would be completely materialistic. And there might be more to say for enjoyment when you talk about endorphins and chemical processes, but it doesn't explain all enjoyment. There is a satisfaction of the soul that doesn't seem to have anything to do with endorphins.
But you can't. They couldn't have enjoyed it 100% of the time. So why wouldn't they have stopped doing it as soon as the negative reaction started happening in it? Like, I just like the whole process just seems off.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Like, why even worry about this if you think you don't have free will? But the problem is, you thought you don't have free will, so automatically you thought. Problem: the referee blows his whistle. You can't do that because you got no free will. No thinking allowed here. Because thinking is a necessary requirement for free will. You don't just random that. In fact, I should make a distinction here. Some people propose that quantum mechanics explains free will. So wave function collapses. It was unpredictable, and you either went yes or no. But the unpredictability is not free will.
But who came up with that, and how did they come up with that? Like, why did the laws of physics make them think that?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff there. Like, why even worry about quantum mechanics? Like, who's going to sit down if they don't have a mind, if it's all determined, it's just chemical process? Who's going to sit down and say, hey, why don't this happen, and how come when we measure the spin of electrons we can't determine? Well, that kind of stuff. None of that's going to happen if it's all determined. Nature would just plod on deterministically doing what the laws of physics determine it to do. You'll never build up huge anomalies like humans walking around inventing spacecraft. That'll never happen in nature. It always goes to equilibrium, to the lowest, to the easiest achievable state. It always runs down to that state. Never massive intelligent anomalies wondering why Kirk Durston published this video talking about free will.
Okay, and so I have a couple like rapid fire questions. We have a few minutes left, but I'm going to leave predestination for another day because that could be a long discussion. Assuming,
but I think it's resolvable. I mean,
assuming we're made to have that discussion. Like, I can't guarantee that.
Well, that raises the question. Like, we've just talked about laws of physics determining your decisions, and we did a little bit about God determining it. But how do we know that God has given us free will? And the basic response, the quick response is, well, we can make decisions he doesn't like. Well, for example, he says ancient Israel was doing terrible things. And there's a nice little quote here. He said, where is this example here? predestination. Oh yeah, here it is. He said, "You're doing all this bad stuff, but the thing is," he says, and I quote, "they were offering their children as human sacrifices to the Canaanite god Moloch." And he says, quote, "I had not commanded them, nor had it entered my mind that they should do this abomination." So clearly God, an omniscient being, saying, this didn't come from me, this offering your kids up as human sacrifices. It's an abomination. It's stuff I don't like. And so that would be an argument. If you can do things that God doesn't like and is going to reprove or rebuke you for, then you know that he must not have determined that decision, because you would have it's a very low view of God to say that God makes you do stuff God decides to make you do things he doesn't want you to do. That's a violation of the law of non-contradiction right there. But you're saying God contradicts himself, which is really a low view of God. And you do see that in some systematic theologies, that they will argue you have no free will. And I have discussed this with Christians who subscribe to, let's say, certain types of Reformed theology that say you don't have free will. I had a paper in my office given to me by one heavy-duty staunch subscriber to that. And in that paper, this Reformed theologian argues that God is the first cause of all evil, as well as all good. And he would be absolutely right if, in fact, you don't have free will. But what kind of a God do you get from that? Certainly not the kind that in the Bible.
And what would be the point?
It becomes what would be the point? Yeah, I mean, it's like God is creating a world that he hates and loves, and that he makes you do things that he doesn't want you to do. There's so many violations of the law of non-contradiction, which I argue is an attribute of God himself. So he violates himself in so many different ways. But this will emerge again when we talk about predestination, because it's a very important aspect of that.
So I have two other questions that have come to mind as I've been thinking about this. One, is free will really a human thing, or is there other animals? Are there animals that have free will? Like, I think of my dog.
Mm-hmm.
And he's stupid. He doesn't think. He reacts to what's going on around him. Is there cheese on the counter? Is there anything on the counter that he can eat? And he will just do it. But he knows if I'm there, he can't just do it unless I turn my back. Mm-hmm. So are the laws of nature making him think? Or is it just he's reacting?
It's a very interesting question, because like I had a problem in my garden shed. There's a latch, you just lift and open the door. And a raccoon was coming every night, lifting the latch, going in, closing the door, and having a nice, comfy nap all night long, and doing his business in my wheelbarrow. And this went on till it was... So I solved
Isn't that just
problem.
Fertilizer? Can't you? Is it not just a fertilizer?
Oh man, so. Anyways, I solved that problem by adjusting the latch, locking it so he can't get in. But you look at animals, there seems to be thinking going on when the raccoon lifts the latch. But the problem with determining whether the animal has free will or not is a concept we call behavioral modification. That's part of it. That your behavior can be trained. So your brain does appear, the physical part of your brain does appear to be something we might call a neural network, and it can be trained. And it's trained by stimuli. Like, for example, in the past, you may have seen the raccoon sees this latch. What's this? And it opens the door. And there's a reward. There's a comfy, warm spot in there. It doesn't have to worry about coyotes or cougars getting it. So there is a reward, and it just was all accidental. It just happened this way. But the neural network gets trained. There's been a reward for this behavior, and it remembers. It has a memory system. So you got memories associated with rewards. And you can go on and on like this till you actually look at animals and you say there seems to be, it looks like thinking. It looks like they're making a decision. But it's all programmed by this neural network. It's a reward system. So that's I can't really answer that, but I think Michael Egnor will be an interesting person to ask. Although maybe he will be like he hasn't done brain surgery so far as I know on animals, so he doesn't have the same experimental observations to make on animals. But at this point, I would say that animals, at least from a religious perspective, a theological one, God does not seem to hold animals morally responsible for their so-called decisions. It's all behavioral reward punishment modification. In fact, I was in North Korea and found out while I was there, been there a couple of times, and once for a month, where you get to discuss, find out all sorts of things. But one of the things they do not, or at least at the time I was there, this would be back around 1988 or 89, they did not believe in psychology because they thought that's religious. They're total fans of behavioral modification. So that's why they will use what we might call brainwashing, reward, punishment, very much a part of how the North Korean regime works or keeps its people doing what they want them to do is through a system of rewards and punishment. And all you need is a neural network for that could be trained, and then the population behaves themselves, except we know from other examples in history the population gets tired of that. Now, what is it about them that gets tired about this? I mean, if they've grown up in that system, they've never known anything different. Even the media is not allowed, so they don't get TV or internet, not the normal citizens. So even then, you see that there's still something where they don't like this and they overthrow the system. So yeah, animals, I tend to think they certainly do not have free will, at least that can perform moral deliberations. Otherwise, God might hold them responsible, which he does not.
All right. And then the other question I have is when you look at the brain, and maybe this is a better question for the doctor when he comes in, but with brain illness, or one of my daughters has anxiety, and the people that were helping us with that turned us to a TED talk about the amygdala and how the amygdala and how it works.
Yeah.
And in that TED talk, he talks about a guy who had a railroad spike that went through his amygdala and totally changed all his behavior.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that story.
So, it's
a bit of an urban myth, though, because there's a lot more information about that guy. And what happens is that actually happened is that he eventually returned. He adapted and became a normal person who made normal decisions, but that took time. And so this is one thing the brain surgeon Michael Egnor does point out, is that you can damage the brain, and it causes various problems. And this is one of the reasons he thinks there's got to be a mind here. So the mind, which he says is completely immaterial, it interfaces with the brain, but it observes, we got a problem here. This interface is badly damaged. We're going to have to create a workaround, and it's the mind that will start figuring out a workaround. For example, if you cut right through, if you separate the two halves of the brain, if the mind emerges, is an emergent property of the brain, you essentially have two brains now. You have two brains that can't talk to each other anymore. There's no connection between the two, so you would predict you should have two minds, because the mind is an emergent property of the brain. So you never get two minds, he says. You always get the one mind, who now realizes we got a bit of a problem, because if you put a card up here, the left eye can't see what the right eye is seeing, and so the right eye, I might be getting mixed up on which side of the brain, will recognize, oh, that's an apple, but they can't tell you what it's called until the other eye figures it out, sees it. But so the mind very quickly learns to adapt and say, if there's something here, I don't know what that is, but I do know that if I get the other side of my brain to get the visual input, then I'll know. And so it'll tell the brain, turn your head so that you can get the other info, and then you will be able to tell the guy that that's an apple. So that's a very simple thing that he talks about, but he's done literally thousands of brain surgeries. And it's not you see, here's the deal. In a materialistic worldview, everything that we would attribute to a mind is actually physically caused by the laws of nature and this complex chunk of chemicals we call a brain. Everything. Under the free will thing, it's not a question of everything you do is now your mind and your brain is just sitting there as a useless appendage. No. It's a combination. They work in sync. And your brain is an amazing thing that runs your body pretty much. So you don't have to think of when your next heartbeat is. And it can actually produce and simulate things. So a lot of mistakes people make in talking about free will in the mind is, say, brain damage and so forth, is that they fail to realize that, but Michael Egnor, see, he's not just coming to his conclusions on the basis of this incident that happened in a mine, like 100 years ago. He is a guy who's actually doing brain surgery on, by now, thousands of patients, and he's observing firsthand, making observations that tell him that, yes, you can damage the interface, but the mind will figure out a workaround. If the interface is still not so badly damaged that
Right.
a workaround is possible.
So, like, if you think of somebody who was born with a disease where the brain doesn't work as we would see as normal,
Yeah.
the mind may still be there in the.
He would argue it is,
In
but it's
in
got
a
a badly defective interface.
So I'm just thinking of people that aren't able to either communicate or do something that would enable them to show they have free will.
Yeah.
Is it something that I'm not quite sure where to go from here, but it's like there's a difference between like the body doing its thing versus there's actual thought going into what the body is doing.
Yeah, there is a difference because the body will do stuff, and it's up to the mind to exercise some self-control. Let's say somebody slaps you in the face at a hockey game. There's actually just instinctive reactions. You don't have to deliberate on this. Where the deliberation comes in is, will I restrain what my body wants to do here? There's just a reward punishment, it's a self-defense mechanism. Smash the guy's face in.
Yeah.
And you don't think about this. It's just simply programmed into your neural network that there's a threat of harm here. And this is just programmed in where the mind enters. Another interesting point about this, Sheldon, is, and I'm reading his chapter on comatose patients, because the person that appears to be in a vegetative state, now they know, and they have a certain percentage, like I remember at least 10% of people in vegetative states, when they put brain things on them, or when they resuscitate them eventually, they are actually hearing what's going on in the room. It's just they can't do a thing about it, and there really almost is there doesn't seem to be even any physical brain scan evidence that they're hearing, but then when they're resuscitated, yeah. So they have a rule now. I don't know if this is for all hospitals, but it's certainly in the ones that he works in. Never say anything in a room with a comatose patient that you would not say to them to their face if they were fully cognizant. This same thing applies to people with severe mental disabilities. Let's say somebody who's so mentally impaired that you can just talk about them right there in the room and stuff. Well, their brain is definitely got a problem, but their mind does not. And the evidence is accumulating that they're trapped, and in fact, many of them, they're trapped in a brain and a body that they know is badly defective, but they hear the insults and the derogatory things you're saying about them. Often they get spoken of as they're just an animal. They hear all this, they understand it, but there's nothing they can do about it because their brain is actually in very poor condition.
So then there's the ethical question. In a body, you have a heart that you can do a heart transplant or a lung transplant. Are we at a point where a brain transplant is just as ethical as a heart transplant?
Oh,
I'm not going to make you answer that today. It is time for us to head to our next meeting. But those of you that are watching either now or later, feel free, ask your questions in the chat. We'll get to them. And head over to kirkdurston.com to read his article on free will. And we will see you next week.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.